In this video, we're going to review how to tell what sign my answer will have in an exponent problem. When solving exponents, it's important that you follow the order of operations, which is to take care of grouping symbols first, then exponents, then multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction at the same time. Okay, in this problem, negative 5 to the fourth, I don't have any grouping symbols, so I can move on to my exponent. Now we need to discuss what that exponent is attached to. The exponent will only attach itself to the 5 unless there's a grouping symbol to cause it to also be attached to the negative. So right now my negative is separate from my 5 because that exponent of 4 can only attach itself to that 5. So I need to solve this part first, 5 to the fourth. Well, 5 to the fourth would be 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, which we're not going to figure that out because what we're really after in this problem is just what sign my answer will have. 5 to the fourth is going to be positive, but then I have that negative out front. It's then, we're at the multiplication step, we would have to multiply by that negative. So now I know a negative times a positive would be a negative. My answer would be whatever negative 5 to the fourth ends up being. All right, let's look at these two examples. Now we've got similar problems. My base is still 5, but the negative is inside of a parentheses, a grouping symbol, which is going to change the meaning of this problem. Since in the first example, the negative 5, or the negative and the 5 is inside the parentheses, that means my base is negative 5, not just the 5. So now the negative 5 is being repeated 4 times. And so I've got to just think, if I have 4 negatives being multiplied together, then what would that happen or result in? It would result in a positive answer. But now let's contrast that with the second example. In the second example, my exponent is a 5. So now the base of negative 5 would be repeated 5 times, which means I would have an odd amount in negatives. And so if we were to think about these first two, a negative times a negative is positive. The second two, a negative times a negative is a positive. But this one, the last one, I don't have anything to pair up with that to cause the negative to turn into a positive. So the answer here is going to be negative. So to summarize this one, when your base is negative, because it's within a parentheses causing the base to be negative, you need to look at your exponent. If it's even, it'll be a positive answer. If it's odd, it'll be a negative answer. All right, now the examples change slightly. We're going to first work with this one where the exponent was 4. We have negative, and I'm going to change colors here. Negative 5, the base of negative 5 to the fourth. The reason I changed colors is we had already determined that this part from the slide before would be a positive answer. But now there's another negative out front, so now that's going to be multiplied onto a negative, causing this one turn out to be negative. But now let's look at the second example. In that one, from the slide before, we had already talked about if we have the base in negative 5 raised to the 5th, turns out to be negative. But that example also has that negative out front. So now it's a negative times a negative, so now that one is positive. So that leading extra negative is actually causing our answer to change, because if we thought of it as just the opposite of the examples I did before, then that would make sense. Finally, let's talk about how you can end up with 0. It's based on the multiplication property of 0, that anything times 0 turns out to be 0. So I see that base and it's raised to the fourth, but I also see the fact that I have times 0. So automatically that answer turns out to be times 0.